Oh, yes.
Welcome back, everyone. Today I'm absolutely thrilled to be bringing you a review that has been a long time coming. This is a review for the new Transformers Legacy Wave 2 Voyager class, Jhiaxus. Now, there have been Jhiaxus toys in the past, but none that have ever accurately captured the character's original appearance in the Generation 2 comic. And this is something that I've been pining for a very long time. Because, I don't know if you know this, but I'm a massive fan of Generation 2. So to actually get this comic original character in toy form, very, very accurate to the source material, it's like a dream come true. Like, this is, one of the things to check off the bucket list for me. So yeah, I am really happy to finally have this guy in hand and be able to do a review for you. That being said, if you've seen my reviews before, you know how this goes. We're going to take a look at Jhiaxus' packaging, then we'll open it up, we'll get a look at his instructions, and then we'll see Jhiaxus himself in both his vehicle and robot modes. Naturally, I'll be doing plenty of group shots and comparisons today, and then at the end of the video, I'll give my final thoughts. So Jhiaxus comes in your standard Voyager packaging for Legacy, complete with this jagged open window where you can reach in and, steal accessories. I'm never going to stop complaining about this, so you guys will just have to get used to that. All right, down below we get, all of our branding, logos, we get his name, and they call him G2 Universe Jhiaxus, which I think is a bit of an odd way of naming things to say G2 Universe, because really G2 is just a continuation of G1, which would be in the same universe, but, they don't want you to think too much on that one. Down at the bottom, we get some very cool artwork of his Cybertronian jet mode flying around, which is something that has led to some people calling Jhiaxus kind of the second generation of Seekers, like what Seekers are for G2. I don't know if I buy into that mentality or not, because he's like one of a kind, and Seekers are usually a group thing, but I don't know. So we turn it this way, and we can see some nice artwork of Jhiaxus' robot mode, both close up and far away. You get his name in Ancient Autobot right here, and I think this artwork is pretty great. I wish his expression were a little more, expressive. Looks kind of neutral here, but oh well. And then on the back, we get renders of Jhiaxus for vehicle and robot modes. He takes 23 steps to transform, so not too bad there. Pretty good for Voyager. And you can see him rocking both of his blasters here. I'm not sure yet where the gray one goes. You can see the red one goes underneath the nose cone. I don't know if he has storage for the gray one. Maybe it goes under a wing, or... well, we'll find out. And then finally here, we can see the QR code that you can scan into the Transformers website to get basically a digital tech spec for Jhiaxus. And then lastly, on this side, we get our Decepticon side of the Legacy side panel. Now we get Jhiaxus' instructions, and as always, you get your branding around the edge, and a nice render of the figure right in the middle. We open this up. This shows you how to have him wield his weapons in each hand, or even store both of them on his back, which is really cool. And then it just gets straight to the transformation to his Cybertronian jet mode. Finishes right here, and then it shows you a way to mount his weapons. Now, this part specifically doesn't actually work the way they depict it here. You'll see that it'll create a clearance issue. And then this, I just don't really like the way it sticks off the front, so I'll show you the way I like to do it. Now we get to see the alt mode, and it is a really, really faithful recreation of his not often seen alt mode from the comics. It has a very alien design and doesn't look, very aerodynamic. It honestly looks more like a spacefaring vessel than a jet. But you can see it's got the wide, cockpit area, it's got the nose cone, it's got the cool bat-like wings, the big fin on the top. Got those really cool tech details from his shins here, which just help make the jet mode look that much better. And you can see how I have the weapons stored. Personally, I think this is the best way to go with them. Well, either this or, have them flipped. Just because it's the most streamlined looking, they're not really, sticking off too far from anything. Looks like a rather natural mounting place for them. But if you want to go with the instructions, you can go ahead and take the red one off. You can place it here. Give him a really, really long gun barrel here off the front of the nose cone. And then this guy, the instructions tell you to place it in here like this, with this peg and this one facing up. But you very quickly run into clearance issues where you can't push it in nearly enough for it to stay in. So they really didn't think that through very well. It doesn't work for a nice secure hold. Now you can have it in the way that I had it, where you use this main post this way. You can flip it to this side and do that. Or if you want to keep them together and keep them a little more symmetrical, you can combine it with the larger red rifle, which is something you'll do for the robot mode here. So, you know, those are kind of your different options for the weapon storage. Or you can just leave them off. A nice clean alt mode. You can see he's got the cool G2 Decepticon symbol or Cybertronian Empire symbol right here. Then the underside is actually fairly clean. He doesn't have landing gear, which is a little unfortunate. It would have been a nice touch, but he kind of gets a pass because he is an alien spaceship. And he gets just kind of this block platform made of his arms that just help the spacecraft just kind of sit nice and level. You also can see what becomes this little like targeting reticule thing on his shoulder, just kind of hanging out underneath. And it looks odd, right? It looks crooked being kind of at a diagonal, but that's the way it's supposed to go. You can see there's not much wiggle room here. Like that's how it's actually stored, which seems wrong, right? It seems like it's like sloppy or mistransformed, but that's actually the way you're supposed to do it. And then you can see hints of his little leg wings right here, which don't really get in the way of anything. They're just kind of tucked away. It might be honestly the biggest eyesore for me, but again, it's super small. So if the worst eyesore is something insignificant, that says a lot about this guy. Okay, he's also got painted thrusters, which are very cool looking. And it looks like the holes in the thrusters are just the right size to place a 5mm plug of some kind in there, whether it's a blast effect or something else. And overall, it's fairly clean for what it is. You know, they do have to take a character who has never had a necessity to be translated into a physical form, right? He's always just been a comic original creation. They had to take two alt modes designed without a whole lot of thought to how that transformation would actually work and make it happen in real life. And in that regard, I think, you know, they came out with a really good looking alt mode. Honestly, better than a lot of the alt modes we saw for like the Bumblebee movie characters that, you know, they had to make those alt modes up for them. Especially the Soundwave one where he's just a floating square. That thing is just... It's almost like Soundwave's become a cassette. Now here's a quick group shot / comparison with the Thrilling 30 Jhiaxus toy, which was a very heavy retool of the Armada Starscream. So his jet mode more or less looks like Armada Starscreams with some, you know, specific different details thrown in there. Which is actually really interesting because this guy has a level of retooling that was very rarely seen in Thrilling 30. Right? Thrilling 30 did not do a whole lot of retooling with shared molds. Usually it was just, you know, a new head or something. So yeah, he actually got a lot of attention. And I do actually think this is a good toy. Like, just for what he is in a vacuum, really great figure. But he really didn't scratch that itch for most people that wanted a, you know, Jhiaxus from the G2 comics. So now we have this. And I'm just happy they both exist, honestly. I love the G2 one, I love this one. So in this case, I think the more the merrier. Now, I don't have the very first Jhiaxus toy that was made, and that was the Robots in Disguise character, who's really from a different continuity anyway. But that guy was just a recolor of Beast Machine's Deluxe Jetstorm, and his black and gray and orange color scheme is actually where this figure got its color scheme. Now, would I have chosen those colors for this? No, I would try to make them as close to the source material as possible, but for whatever reason, they wanted to make Jhiaxus orange. I don't know why. So that makes this figure all the more special because this is the first time we've actually received Jhiaxus, not just in his original form, but his original color scheme, as garish as it may be. Alright, now it's time to transform Jhiaxus to his robot mode. So as always, make sure you remove the accessories first. And we're going to go ahead. We're going to fold in his wings right here. I'm going to untab them from this little spot on the legs. And pull this out, swing it up until it connects to this tab right up here. Swing the wing down until that tabs into itself. Same thing here, just kind of one nice smooth motion. You're kind of rotating and pulling away at the same time. Go ahead and untab the forearms from the legs. Lift these just kind of up and out of the way. Flip out the leg wings. And you're going to pop the kneecaps loose from this back panel here. If it'll let you, it might actually help to separate the legs first. A little more purchase there. There you go. Alright, so once you get those untabbed from there, untab the feet from the thrusters. And rotate all this stuff down. Flip the feet out before you come all the way down. And just kind of collapses in on itself, like so. Same thing here. Feet out, rotate it. And then take this fin and fold it in to form the inside of the calves. It'll actually kind of click into place, which is nice. It's a solid connection. And we're going to go ahead, flip this whole panel up, and this is going to plug in this little slot right here on the top of the cockpit. Twist them around the waist, like so. Then we're going to go ahead, swing these bits out. We're going to lift this panel off of this one. It's tabbed in here on the edges. Kind of wriggle them free from each other. So that'll kind of fold down. This will fold back, revealing the head. So you flip this panel all the way around, turn the head around. Now, my copy has a bit of a QC issue where the head tends to pop off of the ball joint, and it'll just kind of hang there from the chin. All you gotta do is just push the head back forward to pop the joint back in place, like so. Don't know if they all do that, but mine does that. It's a minor annoyance. I mean, it's easily fixable. But... All right, so you swing the reticule out, swing the nose cone in, bring that down, bring this forward, making sure that these tabs and this tab all mesh where they're supposed to go in their little slots here, like so. All right, bring the shoulders in. You're gonna open these forearm panels because yes, he has forearm panels that cover up the gaps in his forearms. He's already fancier than most toys these days. Remember, this is a Voyager, right? Things usually not allowed for Voyagers anymore, but he gets them. And there we go. Here is the very G2 Comics accurate rendition of Jhiaxus' robot mode. And this guy has got a presence to him. He's a good-sized Voyager. He's almost about the size of older Voyagers, which is nice. But, you know, way more articulation than somebody like Vector Prime. Speaking of articulation, we already covered that his head's on that ball joint. Got universal shoulders, which go out. So this reticule can get in the way of this shoulder here. This one does a little more. Swing back and forth. He's got a bicep swivel. Single bend elbows that can get a nice deep bend. Wrist swivel, another somewhat rarity. Finger articulation. That is not something you see below at least the leader price point, and then a lot of the times not even at that. So very, very nicely done arms and hands. He's got a full waist swivel. He's got universal hips that can swing out, swing forward on these little panels like within his hip skirt, which is kind of cool. Very high thigh swivel. Got a single knee bend that can go very, very deep. And then ankle tilt. So very posable, like incredibly posable, especially at this price point. And yeah, I mean, very, very solid Voyager class toy. Blows most other modern Voyagers just completely out of the water with his articulation. And let's talk about the fact that he has almost no hollowness about him at all. Look at that. No giant gaping holes anywhere. Like you can see tiny, tiny bits like the mushroom pegs on the wrists. A tiny bit showing like underneath the thigh swivel. Other than that though, incredibly solid. Like I think even more filled out than Cyclonus. And Cyclonus was, you know, an amazing Voyager class toy. And he was so good that he took my top spot for the best Voyager of 2021. And I gotta say, if this guy, you know, continues to impress, he may very well end up in that spot for 2022 because he is very, very similar to Cyclonus in terms of quality, and in some ways even better. All right, so let's talk about his weapons. So for storage of the weapons, you're going to take the two rifles, plug them together, and then sling them across his back. A nice, like, diagonal position. So you get something that looks like that. Looks very natural. Looks like something you can, you know, reach over his back and grab and, you know, fling forward and wield. So very nice bit of weapon storage. He can wield them together as one large weapon. It's kind of cool. Or even better, he can dual wield them, which is probably the best option here. So place one in each hand. He holds them very securely, even with the opening fingers. Look at that. Look at this. Just absolute titan of a character. I mean, he is really, really cool. And then when it comes to his weapons, there's one more thing I should cover. And you guys may have already seen other reviews of this guy and may know what I'm talking about. So his targeting reticule thing on his shoulder, the front half of this can actually come off. And it's just held on by a little 5mm post there. Now, a lot of people have discovered this, but I don't think anybody really truly knows the purpose for this. It could just be that you take it off and you can place like a fire blast effect or something on here. A lot of people have noticed that the back of his large red rifle is very similar in shape to this thing. And when you plug it into that, it looks like it belongs, right? It looks like it's become a new weapon where it's firing out of the back. And I think this has to be intentional because of the fact that, you know, the shaping, the color, and everything is so perfect. Plus the fact that this just happens to have a random 5mm hole in the back of it. But what I can't really figure out is the purpose of this. Because while it looks really cool, it's kind of unwieldy, right? Because if you want this thing facing forward, because now it's the barrel of the weapon, well, this little handle bit right here gets in the way of him holding it normally, so he can't just hold it straight on it. He'd have to hold it like an angle, which looks weird. You can get it on his forearm, but that creates some clearance issues because it's really long in the back. And I've seen people show it to where you could attach it this way in the jet mode, which is definitely true, but there doesn't seem to be a really great looking way to attach it. Like trying to store it under the nose cone, you can't store it facing out like this because this thing gets in the way, so you might be able to do it from the side peg. I'm not really sure. I feel that this is probably a feature they worked in there and either didn't finish it or were dissatisfied with it, so they just kind of left it out of the instructions and ignored the whole thing. What is cool is that if you do remove this piece, you can actually hide the rest of the reticule away. So you kind of open his torso back up here. If it'll let me. Come on, buddy. There we go. All right, you'll want to swing the nose cone out for a second, just to make room. And now this thing will actually swing all the way in without the little front plate attached. So it'll be nice and out of the way, and then you can put them back together, and you get a slightly cleaner look for Jhiaxus if you don't like having that little extra accessory on his shoulder. And totally up to you what you want to do with that. Again, I really am not entirely sure what the purpose of this was. Maybe, you know, they did this and then realized that the clearance just doesn't work out, so that's why they dropped it. I don't really know. I guess the best use for it in this mode would be just some sort of a forearm mounted weapon, because that's all I can really see doing with it. So, yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a mystery. I would love if somebody could ask someone from Hasbro the next time they do a live stream or interview or something what the purpose behind that was, or if it was even intentional or just a coincidence. Maybe this just comes off because they want you to plug something into it. Maybe it was just designed that way out of ease of construction. Not really sure, but it is intriguing. Here's a quick group shot with Cyclonus, the Voyager that I keep mentioning and praising here during this review. And I wanted to show these two together because they're kind of kindred spirits. They're both Voyager-sized Decepticon flyers. They're both the first true attempt at like a fiction-accurate portrayal of, you know, their respective characters. And they're both just incredibly solid figures. You can see they're roughly the same height, not counting Cyclonus's little nose cone horns sticking up there, and, you know, roughly the same build, same proportions, and they're very, very close in weight. I think Cyclonus may be slightly heavier than Jhiaxus, but Jhiaxus is still very solid, and he makes up for maybe being a little bit lighter with the fact that he does have slightly better articulation in the form of his opening and closing fingers. He also, in my opinion, has much more solid knee joints, because Cyclonus's, they're a little iffy because the knees are kind of on this double hinge, and if you don't manipulate him properly, you'll have this hinge right here, you know, move around, which either cause his knees to like sink into his calves or like come up out of them. So, you know, Cyclonus, he looks really good, but he does have that finickiness when it comes to, you know, the knees. So yeah, really just kindred spirits here, like just both the quintessential updates to their old designs. Well, really, in Jhiaxus' case, this is the first time they've actually portrayed his original design in plastic. The orange one was just an IDW exclusive, then the Jetstorm one was a different guy entirely. But you get what I'm saying. They are both just the best representations we've ever received of these characters. And now here's our comparison shot with the robot mode of Thrilling 30 Jhiaxus. And you can see these guys are just very different in form. The only physical trait they really have in common at all is just the general look of the head. And even then, the Thrilling 30 or IDW version is a little bit stylized and doesn't quite look like the original. Then really everything from the neck down is just an orange Armada Starscream body, with the major difference being the wings looking pretty radically altered from the Starscream body. And he does get a twin pair of blasters instead of swords, which does at least put him a little bit closer to this guy right here. But, I mean, really there's no contest when it comes to accuracy. Like, this guy just is G1 Jhiaxus. Or G2 Jhiaxus, really. This guy right here is just IDW Jhiaxus, who admittedly took on a number of forms during his time before he was killed. In fact, this is the form he had when he was killed. He had forms that looked just like this. He had ones that were like a weird blend of his G2 form and like movie Starscream for some reason. So much like Starscream himself in the original run of the IDW comics, this Jhiaxus liked to change his form a lot. And they even explained away the radically different color scheme by saying he was wearing some sort of modular armor that would like alter his appearance to counter his foes' attacks, which is why he ended up, configuring into a Starscream-like body before Starscream ended up killing him. And like I said, I really do like this toy. It's a really good deluxe class toy. And honestly, if he just had some ankle tilt built in, I'd say he'd be roughly the equivalent of a modern deluxe. But this guy right here, for me, as a G2 fan, is just where it's at. He's got the right size for Jhiaxus, who's always been shown to be a rather large character. He's got the look, the colors, everything. For me, if you are looking for the original Jhiaxus, there really is no substitution here. This guy doesn't even come close to the mark. But like I said with the vehicle modes, I am happy they both exist because I have the original guy and the IDW version, which, like in look and personality, were very different characters. For some reason, modern interpretations of Jhiaxus have made him more of a Shockwave-like character, where he's kind of this groveling, scheming, mad scientist type instead of the conquering imperialist that we get with the old G2 comics, in service to the one and only Liege Maximo. Which reminds me, we really need a good figure of that guy. We got so cheated with Power of the Primes, where they had like scrapped their plans to actually make the Primes proper and instead gave us basically Titan Master Primes, which is the biggest letdown ever. Coupled with those guys combining with halfway realized Pretenders, I mean, the whole Prime Master concept was just a massive disappointment for me. I wanted the Primes, and I really wanted Liege Maximo. I do wonder what he would have looked like if they would have kept him close to the aligned continuity appearance, where he's basically Robot Loki, or if they would go with something closer to his more monstrous appearance from the G2 comics, or maybe somewhere in between. I think in between is probably the best way to go, because the G2 comics, Liege Maximo really didn't look like he transformed into anything, so I don't know. I'm crossing my fingers on it, because having a boss for this guy to serve would be awesome, but I don't see it happening anytime soon, if ever. The whole 13 Primes seem to have kind of fallen out of favor with Hasbro. I don't know if they're ever going to bother making toys of those guys. Except, of course, Alpha Trion, but he was retconned into being one of the 13. He's been an actual character since G1. Now here, probably my favorite group shot for this video, is Jhiaxus with the other Generation 2 faction leaders. So on the left, we get our Transformers Legacy Laser Optimus Prime, representing the G2 Autobots. And then on the right, we get our Earthrise or Generation Selects G2 Megatron, representing, obviously, the G2 Decepticons. And that honestly gets a little bit confusing itself, because Jhiaxus is really properly the leader of the second generation Decepticons, which was kind of a splinter faction that formed from the original Decepticons, and then they just kind of considered themselves the true Cybertronians. So I'm not sure how much they actually consider themselves Decepticons, or if they only consider themselves Cybertronians, but they still wore, this badge, which I guess got adapted by the like Decepticons proper. I don't know, it's all a big confusing mess, and because G2 ended so abruptly, there were a lot of unanswered questions. Now, some of those questions were answered in Alignment, which was an unofficial novel penned by Simon Furman to help kind of wrap up the G2 story. And I personally consider everything in Alignment to be canon, because there's never been anything that really contradicted that. But it's still not officially recognized, so unless Hasbro decides to be awesome and do that one day, it is considered pseudo-canon. Anyway, aside from this just being a nice shot of, having the three faction leaders together, it's also a good way to see how they compare, and you can see that Jhiaxus, he actually ends up standing just a little bit taller than both of these two. Again, not counting kibble or anything, but just, their heads, their actual height. And while Optimus here is technically a leader class, the main robot is a Voyager-sized figure. So they definitely got the scale in there. Again, the exact height difference between these guys is always going to fluctuate a little bit depending on the interpretation. Sometimes, Optimus might be a little bit bigger than Megatron, sometimes the other way around. But as long as they're, within the same neighborhood of each other, I consider that close enough. And these guys absolutely nail it. In fact, I kind of like the idea of Jhiaxus being just a little bit bigger than these other two because he is supposed to be, more highly evolved. And he was a very, very powerful character in both Generation 2 and the Regeneration 1 kind of reimagining of G2. So I think he just looks really good next to these guys. Of course, with him having those traditional G2 bright colors helps him blend in even more. And for me, this is almost kind of like a pipe dream come true. I really never thought we would get modern figures of our G2 Optimus, G2 Megatron, and then Jhiaxus. Now, to be fair, the Megatron is a bit lacking when it comes to a proper G2 update because he is really just a recolored G1 Megatron. He doesn't have the proper Cobra-built body that Megatron gets in the G2 comic. And I would still be very happy if they put that guy out. As annoyed as I would be having to buy another toy to finally get the right G2 Megatron, I would be pleased enough with a more accurate version to where I could just kind of forget I ever bought this guy. And honestly, if I were the type of collector to sell off some of my toys, he would be sold off in a heartbeat if I could replace him with a better version. But he suffices for now. At a glance, he looks the part. He's got the right colors and everything. He just really doesn't have the right shape. And I would be very interested in receiving a Megatron that looks closer to the mark so that I can pair him up with these guys right here, because it would be an even better group shot than what we already have. And this completes our look at the very long-awaited Transformers Legacy Jhiaxus. Like I've been saying, this toy for me is pretty much a dream come true. He's one of those guys on my bucket list I never really thought that we would see a proper update for. So finally getting one and having him come out so well. I mean, he's easily one of the best Voyagers to come out since, the start of the War for Cybertron trilogy. I mean, very, very solid. Just no hollowness, tons of articulation, more than pretty much, I think, any Voyager that's been sold as a Voyager and not like, a leader with some pack-in stuff. And I mean, he just looks good. He does everything he's supposed to do. The robot mode looks great. The spaceship or jet mode looks really good. The block of arms that he has on the underside of that, not the best thing, but because there's not really anything else to go off of or contradict it, it's not wrong. Maybe there could have been a cleaner way to handle it, but I mean, it's just the underside, so I'm not too worried about it. So, yeah, I really love this guy. I could not be more pleased with what we got. He's everything I could have asked for in a modern update to the old Jhiaxus design. So, if you are a fan of G2, or you like the idea of Jhiaxus, maybe you learned about him through the newer comics and stories rather than the old stuff, or you just want a really, really solid Voyager class toy, I think you'll be very satisfied with this guy. Like, garish colors and all, because he's just so cool. I have no idea what they're going to recolor or retool this guy into, if they ever are, because I can't think of anything they would. He seems kind of like a double dealer to just be a one-and-done design, where there's not a whole lot you can do with him. Jhiaxus more so than double dealer. I actually had a few ideas for what they could have done with him, but they don't seem to be interested in doing it, at least not anytime soon. This guy, he's so unique, I really don't know what you could do with him without some massive retooling. Maybe they'll decide to like take the easy road and just do an orange version of this guy. And I don't know if they call him Jhiaxus or what they do. But aside from just making maybe a different version of him, I'm not sure where they could go. Which makes this guy even more special, right? They went out of their way to design such a nice figure that may not ever actually get reused. So they're never gonna, get that extra recoupment out of the mold cost. They're just gonna produce him, hope he sells well, and move on with just a figure that's about as perfect as it can be. And there is some beauty to that. It's not something you see much anymore. So yeah, I think anyone that picks this guy up will be very, very happy with him because I know I am just ecstatic to own this toy. Of course, that is just how I feel about this figure. So now I want to know what you all think of this Jhiaxus. Is he, just this amazing thing you've been waiting on? Have you always wanted a proper one? Or do you just want him because he's cool looking? Or do you not like this toy? Maybe because you just have no interest in the character at all. Maybe you hate G2 and you hate the bright colors and everything. Or maybe you just don't like the way it turned out. Any and all feedback is always welcome in that comment section. If you enjoyed this review, make sure to toss it a like. Let YouTube know you want to see more stuff like this. If you do want to see more like this, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you always get a heads up when I post something new. And thank you for joining me for this look at the brand new Transformers Legacy Voyager class Decepticon G2 Universe Jhiaxus. With all that said, I will see you next time.